a new adventure. Was your adventure pleasant today? Come, sit with us by the fire and warm yourself on this cold night. As the flames chase away the chill, would you like to hear the tale of my journey? Very well. Make yourself comfortable, let the warmth embrace you, and listen closely to the story I am about to tell. The princess who was kidnapped by the dragon. Eldoria was a land admired by its neighbors, a kingdom nestled between green valleys and silver rivers, where the harvests were plentiful and the people loyal. High upon a hill stood the royal citadel, its marble towers gleaming like ivory against the sun. Inside its walls resided King Aldrin, a man whose wisdom had preserved peace for decades, and Queen Serafina, whose grace softened the stern hand of the crown. Yet of all who dwelled in the castle, none was more cherished than their daughter, Princess Elara. Elara was no ordinary royal. Though noble by blood, she spent her days among commoners, tending to the sick, singing with children, and listening to the hardships of farmers. She was as radiant in spirit as she was in beauty. Her laughter like music, her kindness a balm to the weary. To the people, she was more than a princess. She was a symbol of hope. But in the far corners of Eldoria, where the mountains clawed the skies and storms gathered in silence, hope was not enough to banish old fears. For in those peaks, it was whispered, something ancient had awakened. The midsummer festival arrived, a time of unity when lords and peasants danced side by side in celebration of the season's bounty. Lanterns, shaped like stars and flowers, floated into the night sky, painting the heavens with soft light. Musicians filled the air with the sound of flutes and lutes, and the scent of roasted meats and honey cakes wafted through the streets. The king and queen joined their people, smiling as they watched Elara move through the crowd, her golden gown shimmering like sunlight upon water. Yet even as joy flourished and unease lingered, some of the older villagers whispered of omens. The red moon that had risen weeks earlier, the sudden silence of forests at night, and the strange scorch marks found in the fields near the northern border. But their warnings were drowned beneath laughter and song. No one wished to spoil the merriment with tales of dread. As the music swelled, Elara wandered to the edge of the festival, seeking a moment of quiet beneath the silver light of the moon. She followed the glow of fireflies into the forest, her heart light with wonder. But the wonder turned swiftly to terror when the ground trembled and a shadow fell across the clearing. The air shuddered with the beat of vast wings. A roar split the night, so powerful that lanterns quivered and shattered in the distant square. The dragon descended, its scales black as obsidian and edged with crimson as though forged in fire. Its eyes burned with molten fury, glowing like twin furnaces in the dark. Elara stood frozen, her breath caught in her throat as the beast's shadow swallowed her whole. Before she could scream, the dragon's claws closed around her slender frame. She struggled, kicking and calling out, but the roar drowned her cries. The creature's wings stretched wide, blotting out the moon, and with a mighty thrust it carried her into the heavens. Below, the festival erupted into chaos. The music ceased, the people screamed, and the king's guard stormed into the forest too late to do more than watch the princess vanish into the night. The dragon's flight was like a storm tearing across the sky. Sparks rained from its wings, and the earth trembled in its wake. Villagers dropped to their knees in terror, for none had seen such a beast in living memory. Mothers clutched their children, men raised their fists in vain, and elders whispered a name they had hoped never to utter again, Valrath, the last of fire's wrath. When the truth spread through Eldoria, despair fell upon the land like a shroud. Queen Serafina wept openly, her cries echoing to the halls of the citadel, while King Aldrin summoned his council, his face carved from stone. Messengers rode through the kingdom, carrying proclamations that promised riches, land, and honor to whoever could return the princess alive. Knights, mercenaries, and adventurers from distant realms answered the call, yet all knew that facing a dragon was no common feat. It was a march toward death among the people. Fear twisted into rumors. Some believed the dragon had returned to avenge its fallen kin, slain by Eldoria's ancestors. Others whispered that it had not taken Elara to kill her, but for some darker purpose. That the princess was needed to awaken an ancient power sealed away long ago. In taverns and market squares, stories grew wild, but they all carried one truth. The fate of the kingdom now hung upon the shoulders of the missing princess. Far to the north, across jagged peaks where storms never ceased, the dragon carried Elara to its lair. The cavern was vast, carved deep into the mountain's heart, where rivers of molten rock painted the walls in crimson light. The air was suffocating, hot with the breath of the earth itself. The dragon set Elara upon a ledge, and though her body trembled, her spirit did not break. She lifted her chin, meeting the beast's gaze with all the courage she could summon. To her shock, the dragon spoke. Its voice rumbled like distant thunder, shaking the stone around them. "You are not my prisoner. You are my key." The words pierced her like a blade. A key to what? Elara's mind swirled with questions, but before she could speak again, the dragon's shadow retreated deeper into the cavern, its burning eyes lingering on her until the darkness swallowed them whole. Alone now, the princess stood upon the ledge, staring into the rivers of fire below, realizing with growing dread that her fate was bound to a mystery older than her kingdom itself. The throne room of Eldoria, usually filled with light and laughter, had become a chamber of shadows. King Aldrin sat upon his throne, his face pale and stern, his hands gripping the armrest as though to keep himself from trembling. Around him gathered his council of generals, scholars, and advisors, each murmuring anxiously. The air was heavy with grief, yet heavier still with fear, for no man alive had stood against a dragon and lived to tell of it. "Knights will not be enough," said Lord Durick, the commander of the royal guard, his voice hard as steel. "We need armies, ballistae, sorcerer if we can find it. The beast is no ordinary foe. It is vengeance made flesh." But the royal scholar, Master Owen, shook his head gravely. "To march an army is folly. Dragons are not beasts to be slain by numbers alone. They are ancient cunning, steeped in powers we scarcely comprehend. If it is indeed Valrath who has returned, then steel and fire will only feed its wrath. We must learn what it wants." The room erupted in argument, half demanding vengeance, the other half begging caution. Yet amidst the chaos, King Aldrin rose to his feet. "Enough," he thundered, his voice cutting through the chamber. "The princess lives, and as long as she lives, there is hope. We shall send forth a call. Not only knights, but every soul willing to brave the unknown shall have a chance to prove their valor. Whoever brings back Princess Elara shall be rewarded beyond measure, and remembered for all time." Messengers sped from the citadel like arrows, carrying proclamations to every corner of the kingdom. Within days, the city gates were flooded with warriors, noble knights clad in shining armor, wandering mercenaries with scarred faces, hunters from the wilds, and even scholars clutching dusty tomes of forgotten spells. They came for glory, for gold, for the love of their kingdom, or simply to chase a legend. At dawn, they gathered in the great courtyard beneath banners of crimson and gold. The king himself stood upon the steps of the citadel, looking down upon the sea of warriors. His voice carried across the crowd. "You ride not only for your king and queen, but for every soul in Eldoria. You ride for the hope of a nation, for the life of one who has given everything to her people. Bring my daughter home, and you shall have your place among the greatest of heroes." The crowd roared in response, swords lifted high, banners snapping in the wind. Yet as the oath was spoken, whispers passed through the ranks. Few believed the dragon could truly be slain. Some feared they would never return. And among them stood figures who were not knights nor nobles, but strangers whose paths would soon entwine with destiny. Deep within the royal archives, Master Owen and his apprentices searched feverishly through scrolls and crumbling tomes. At last, by candlelight, they uncovered a fragment of prophecy long forgotten, its words faded yet still haunting. "When fire takes the crown and night swallows the star, a child of light shall be stolen by flame. Only the shadow-born may walk through the fire, and only with her shall the world be reclaimed." The meaning was unclear, but one truth stood out. The princess's abduction was not random. It had been foretold. "Shadow-born," Owen whispered, his brows furrowed. "It cannot mean a knight. Perhaps someone cast out, or one marked by darkness itself." He trembled as realization struck him. Not all who answered the king's call would be worthy. Only one among them was destined to face the dragon and survive. Far from the gathering armies, Elara sat alone in the dragon's lair, her gown torn, her hair tangled, yet her spirit unbroken. The heat of the molten river scorched her skin, but she refused to cower. Each night, the dragon returned, its wings stirring the cavern like a storm, its voice rumbling like stone breaking. "You think your people will come for you," Valras said one evening, its eyes glowing like suns. "But they cannot touch me. They cannot even begin to grasp why I have taken you." "Then tell me," Elara demanded, though her voice wavered. "Tell me why I am here." The dragon lowered its head, and for a fleeting moment, sorrow flickered in its gaze. "Because within you lies what was stolen from us long ago. You are not my prisoner, princess. You are my curse and my salvation." The words unsettled her more than any threat could. She turned away, staring into the endless rivers of fire, her heart heavy with questions. For the first time in her life, she feared that the truth might destroy her far more than the dragon's flames. As Eldoria's chosen heroes set forth into the wild, the kingdom watched with both hope and dread. The knights rode with banners flying, the mercenaries with weapons gleaming, and the wanderers with nothing but faith and courage. Beyond the forests and rivers lay the northern mountains, a land of storms and shadows where even the bravest men dared not tread. But among these many souls, fate had marked only one, or perhaps a few. The dragon had spoken of a key. The prophecy whispered of a shadow-born, and in the heart of the mountains waited answers that would change not only the life of Princess Elara, but the destiny of all Eldoria. The quest had begun. The kingdom held its breath. And somewhere in the darkness of the dragon's lair, a princess awaited her fate. When the riders departed Eldoria, they did not travel as one army, but as a scattering of smaller bands. Knights rode proudly with their banners, mercenaries clung to their coin purses, and wanderers slipped into the shadows of the trees. Among this chaotic tide of would-be saviors, a handful of strangers found themselves bound together, not by choice, but by fate. There was Sir Selim, a young knight of noble birth, whose polished armor gleamed, but whose heart carried doubts heavier than a sword. Beside him strode Lyra, a huntress of the wilds, her bow carved from you, her voice sharp with mistrust of kings and crowns. With them traveled Garrick, a mercenary whose blade was as stained as his past, and Alaric, a quiet scholar whose eyes lingered too long on the horizon, as if searching for something unseen. They were joined by others, wanderers, misfits, and dreamers, drawn together on the road north, though none could explain why. Though they shared little in common, the road would soon test them, for the wilds beyond Eldoria were no gentle land. The company's first trial came in the Whispering Woods, a forest so dense that even the noon sun struggled to pierce its canopy. The air was thick with mist, and the trees loomed like watchful giants. At night, voices drifted through the branches, soft murmurs, laughter, and cries that lured men from their campfires. On the second night, one of the mercenaries vanished, his tracks leading into the heart of the woods. Sir Selim wished to pursue, but Lyra held him back. "The forest is alive," she warned. "Step off the path, and you'll be lost forever." But Selim's honor would not allow him to abandon a companion. And so, against Lyra's counsel, a search party entered the fog. They found the mercenary at dawn, lie among the roots of an ancient oak. His eyes were open, his lips parted as though whispering a secret, but no breath stirred his chest. Around him, the trees groaned as though mourning, their bark scarred with claw marks that glowed faintly in the mist. The company left in silence, each step heavier than the last. The woods had taken their first price. As days passed, suspicion festered among the group. Garrick mocked Selim's pride, calling him a gilded fool unfit for real war. Lyra clashed with both, refusing to obey a knight's orders or a Selzward's greed. Alaric, meanwhile, spoke little, but at night he pored over an old scroll, muttering fragments of prophecy. One evening, as rain poured upon their weary camp, Elara's name was spoken aloud for the first time. Selim swore his sword would not rest until the princess was free, but Lyra scoffed. "You speak of saving her as if she were a prize," she said, her eyes narrowing. "Do you even know the woman you claim to rescue? Or is it the king's reward you chase?" Her words stung, for Selim had never met the princess beyond distant glimpses at court. Yet he found no answer, only silence broken by the crackle of fire. In that silence, Alaric finally raised his head. "It doesn't matter what you think of her. he said softly. The dragon did not take her by chance. She is part of something greater. If the prophecy is true, then saving her is not only about a kingdom. It is about the fate of all. Far away, in the heart of the mountain, Elara pressed her hands against the stone walls of her prison, seeking a weakness. Though the dragon kept her alive, it gave her little more than silence and riddles. Yet she would not sit idle. She counted the hours by the glow of molten rivers. She memorized every crack and crevice in the cavern. And she tested the patience of her captor with unyielding words. One night, when Valrath returned, she stood tall before it. "You call me a key," she said, her voice steady. "Then understand this. I will not be turned to serve your will. If my blood carries some power, it belongs to me, not to you." The dragon's molten gaze lingered on her, and for the first time, it did not answer with threat. Instead, it said quietly, almost mournfully, "You speak like your mother once did." The words struck her with confusion and dread. Her mother? What secret had Queen Seraphina carried? Hidden even from her own daughter, the company of strangers finally emerged from the whispering woods. Their spirits dimmed, but their resolve sharpened. Before them rose the jagged outline of the northern mountains, veiled in storm clouds. Lightning forked across the sky, illuminating peaks as sharp as blades. Somewhere within that labyrinth of stone and fire lay Valrath and Princess Elara, yet each step toward the mountains drew them deeper into destiny. None knew which of them would rise as hero, or which would fall into shadow. The prophecy spoke of one who was shadow-born, but who among them carried that mark? As thunder rumbled across the land, the journey into darkness had truly begun. The northern mountains loomed before the company, like the jaws of some ancient beast. Jagged peaks pierced the clouds, their slopes cloaked in perpetual storm. Snow fell in restless flurries, though fire burned in the chasms below, searing the air with heat and ash. To climb into this land was to step into the maw of danger itself. Yet the group pressed on, driven by duty, greed, or fate. Sir Selim led with stubborn pride, his banner torn by the wind, while Lyra scouted the ridges with the sharp eyes of a hawk. Garrick trudged behind with cynical grin, mocking their efforts at every turn, and Alaric lingered in silence, his gaze fixed always on the horizon as if he could see beyond the storm. They were not united, not yet, but the mountains had a way of forcing men and women together, whether they wished it or not. On the third night, as the company made camp beneath a cliff of black stone, strange cries echoed from the darkness. Lyra drew her bow, and Selim unsheathed his blade, but the shadows moved faster than sight. From the crevices emerged creatures twisted by flame. Scaled hound with eyes like embers, their bodies dripping molten drool. They circled the camp, growling, their claws sparking against the rock. "These are no beasts of nature," Alaric whispered, his voice tense. "They are the dragon's watchers." The creatures lunged, and the camp erupted in chaos. Arrows flew, swords clashed, and the air filled with the scent of burning fur. One hound leapt upon Garrick, its jaws snapping inches from his throat, but Selim's blade struck true, cleaving it in two. Another nearly dragged Lyra into the fire, yet she drove her dagger into its eye, sending it shrieking into the abyss. When at last the last of them fell, the survivors collapsed in exhaustion, their clothes scorched and their faces smeared with ash. It was then that they realized. The dragon knew they were coming. The battle had cost them dearly, and fear seeped into cracks of their unity. As they tended their wounds, Garrick spoke bitterly. "We'll never reach the lair. The beast watches every step we take. Better to turn back now while we still live." "Turn back?" Selim spat, his anger flaring. "And leave the princess to die in flame? I'd sooner perish than return with such cowardice." Garrick sneered, his hand tightening on his sword hilt. "And what do you know of death, boy? You've lived your life in marble halls, while men like me bled in the mud. You want glory, not justice." Before blades could be drawn, Lyra stepped between them, her voice like ice. "Enough. Fight each other, and the dragon wins without lifting claw." Her eyes, sharp as arrows, lingered on Garrick. "But mark me, mercenary. If you betray us, I will see you fall before the beast does." The fire crackled between them, casting long shadows. The seeds of distrust had been sown, and though they set their quarrel aside for now, each knew that betrayal could come as swiftly as the next storm. In the dragon's lair, Elara paced restlessly, her thoughts consumed by the strange words Valrath had spoken. "You speak like your mother once did." When next the beast returned, she dared to press him. "What do you know of my mother?" she asked. "Why would you speak her name as if you knew her?" The dragon's eyes glowed with sorrow that unsettled her more than its fury ever had. "Your mother was not the first to stand here. Long ago, before you were born, Seraphina came to these mountains. She was meant to fulfill the pact, but she turned away, and her choice condemned us all." Elara's breath caught. Her mother, the gentle queen who had taught her kindness and love, had once walked in this very place? What pact had she broken? What secret had she hidden from her own daughter? Valrath lowered its head until its furnace-like eyes met hers. "Your bloodline is the binding of the old magic. Without you, the chains cannot be broken. You are more than a princess. Elara, you're the last link in a chain of betrayal." Her world shifted. The kingdom's history, her mother's silence, even her own identity, all now stood beneath a shadow of doubt. At dawn, the company reached a narrow pass where the mountain path split in two, one road leading toward the jagged cliffs of Frostbane, the other into the depths of a canyon that glowed faintly with fire. Both paths promised peril, yet the choice was theirs. "We must take the canyon," Alaric urged, his voice firm. "The prophecy speaks of walking through fire. Only there can we hope to find what lies ahead." Selim nodded, but Lyra frowned. "The canyon is a death trap. We'll be swallowed alive." Garrick, meanwhile, only smirked, as though already weighing how he might twist this decision to his advantage. Storm clouds gathered overhead, and the mountain winds howled like voices of the dead. With every step deeper into the shadow of the peaks, the company drew closer to both their destiny and their doom. The dragon waited, watching, its watcher stirring once more in the dark. Elara awoke to the crackling glow of molten rivers that painted the cavern walls in shades of crimson and gold. Sleep had been restless, haunted by whispers of a past she did not understand and a future she dreaded to meet. When her eyes finally adjusted to the gloom, she found the dragon already waiting, its eyes gleaming like embers in the dark. "You dream of answers, princess," it rumbled, its voice both thunderous and weary. "But dreams are fragments of truth. It is time you learn the cost of the crown you wear." Elara hesitated, her voice thin but steady. "You speak of betrayal and bloodlines, yet all I hear are riddles. Tell me plainly, what do you want from me?" The dragon lowered its massive head, the heat of its breath searing the air around her. "What I want is simple. A vow. Swear that you will undo the sins of your ancestors, and I will grant you power enough to shape your own fate. Refuse, and you remain a prisoner of stone and fire until your people perish trying to free you." The cavern fell silent, except for the hiss of molten stone. Elara's hands trembled at her sides, but she stood firm. "You want me to bind myself to a bargain I don't understand," she said. "I will not swear loyalty to a creature who stole me from my home, who threatens my people with fire. My blood may carry secrets, but my will is my own." The dragon's tail lashed against the stone, sending tremors through the ground. Sparks rained from the ceiling, yet the beast did not strike. Instead, it studied her with an almost human intensity, its eyes narrowing. "Defiance suits you, child. Perhaps that is why fate chose you. Very well, I will not break you. Yet, but know this, your kingdom's strength wanes while you linger here. If you do not claim your role, others will pay the price." For the first time, Elara saw something unexpected in the dragon's gaze, not fury, but sorrow, as though the chains of destiny bound it as tightly as they bound her. Far beyond the mountain, Eldoria stirred with unrest. The king's council had grown divided, half urging immediate war, the other half whispering of omens and ancient prophecies. Sir Kalen, though still wounded from his first encounter with the dragon, stood before the throne once more. "My king," he said, voice resolute, "steel and flame alone cannot decide this war. There is a greater truth hidden in the mountain. If we ignore it, we will lose not only the princess but our kingdom." The court erupted in arguments, but the king's expression was grim. He too remembered the words written in the oldest scrolls, words he'd long dismissed as legend. Perhaps the dragon's abduction of Elara was not an act of cruelty, but of necessity, back in the cavern. Elara sat upon a ledge overlooking the molten rivers. She thought of her father's face, of Kaelin's vowed protector, of the people who would suffer as she failed. The dragon's words echoed in her mind, a vow, a pact, a choice. Her lips did not speak it aloud, but in her heart she made a silent oath. I will uncover the truth. I will not let fear chain me, nor will I let my people fall to fire. If fate has chosen me, then I will bend fate itself. In the shadows, the dragon watched. Though she had not spoken, it seemed to know. Its eyes glowed brighter, its wings shifting as though the air itself acknowledged her vow. Unseen by both, the mountain trembled, not with fury, but with awakening. Something older than dragon or crown stirred beneath the stone, drawn by the courage of a princess and the weight of an unspoken oath. And thus, the true beginning of Elara's destiny had been set in motion. The days blurred into one another in the dragon's lair. Elara, though still a captive, began to notice patterns. The way certain crystals pulsed when the molten rivers surged, the way the walls whispered when the mountain trembled. Guided more by instinct than reason, she followed the faint hum of the cavern one restless night. Her hand brushed against a fissure in the rock, and to her astonishment, the wall shifted. Behind it lay a narrow passage spiraling downward into darkness. She hesitated, her breath quickening, before stepping inside. The air grew colder, unlike the fiery heat of the lair above. At the bottom, she discovered a vast chamber carved not by nature, but by hands long dead. Upon the walls, etched in silver and gold, were murals. Kings standing beside dragons, swords raised in unity rather than war. In the center, an altar stood, upon which lay a shattered crown. Elara reached for it, and as her fingers grazed the metal, visions flooded her mind. Fire, betrayal, a pact broken by greed. She staggered back, her heart pounding. So it was true. The dragon had not lied. Far from the mountain, Sir Kaelin led a company of knights northward. The journey had been grueling. Storms battered their path, and rumors of bandits haunted the villages they passed. Yet Kaelin pressed on, his resolve hardened not just by duty, but by something deeper, a bond to Elara that words could not name. At their nightly camp, Kaelin unrolled a parchment stolen from the royal archives. Upon it was written a fragment of prophecy. When fire takes a crown's air and shadow walks beside flame, only truth unbound shall break the chain. The knights who traveled with him did not know the full weight of those words. To them, this was a rescue mission. To Kaelin, it was a test of destiny. And as the mountain peaks finally came into view, wreathed in storm and ash, he knew their trial was only beginning. When Elara returned to the lair, the dragon was waiting. Its eyes flickered toward the dust upon her hands, the faint shimmer of silver clinging to her dress. So you found it, it said, not with anger, but with grim acceptance. The chamber of vows, the place where men swore brotherhood to my kin, then shattered it with betrayal. Elara met its gaze, her fear tempered now by knowledge. Why show me this truth? Why not let me live in ignorance, as my ancestors chose? The dragon exhaled a plume of smoke that curled like morning, because ignorance breeds ruin, and ruin is near. You, princess, are the last to bear the mark of the pact. Through you, the bond may be restored or destroyed forever. Elara sat in silence, her mind caught between two worlds. Her people waited for her return, desperate and blind to the sins buried beneath their crown. Yet the dragon's truth gnawed at her heart. If she defied it, would Eldoria suffer as punishment? If she embraced it, would she betray her bloodline? Far away, Kaelin and his knights ascended the lower slopes of the mountain. The air grew heavy with ash, and the ground quaked beneath their boots. The dragon had not yet revealed itself, but they felt its presence looming over every shadow. Both Elara and Kaelin now stood on the edge of choices that would bind not just their fates, but the fate of Eldoria itself. And as the mountain growled with unseen power, it became clear that destiny was no longer a distant tale. It was here, demanding to be fulfilled. The path up the mountain was cruel, Ash choked the air, and jagged stones cut at the knight's boots. Kalen led the way, his hand never straying far from his sword. Every step forward felt like a challenge in the mountain itself, an unspoken warning that they trespassed upon sacred ground. The men whispered prayers to the gods, but Kalen's thoughts remained fixed on Elara. He remembered her laughter in the palace gardens, her boldness in court, the way her eyes never dimmed even when duty weighed heavily on her. He had sworn to protect her, and no dragon nor prophecy would turn him from that oath. At last, as twilight bled across the sky, the cavern's mouth came into view. Its jagged arch glowed faintly with heat, as though the mountain itself breathed fire. Kalen tightened his grip on his blade. Here, he thought, the true battle begins. Deep inside, the dragon stirred. Its massive head lifted as it sensed the intruders approaching, the rhythm of their boots trembling through the stone. It turned toward Elara, who sat by the molten river, her face pale with dread. "They come for you," the dragon said. "Your knights, your would-be heroes. But they know nothing of the truth. If they strike not just at me, but at the bond that once kept this land from ruin." Elara rose to her feet, torn between hope and fear. "Do not harm them," she pleaded. "They fight only because they love their kingdom." The dragon's eyes burned brighter, its voice thunderous. And love without knowledge is as dangerous as hate. If they raise their swords, the mountain itself will answer with fire. The knights entered the lair, torches blazing, blades drawn. Heat washed over them, blistering their skin, yet they pressed forward. At the front stood Kalen, his eyes locked on the towering shadow that unfurled from the depths of the cavern. The dragon emerged, wings stretching wide, its scales glinting like molten steel. Flames licked its jaws, casting monstrous shadows across the cavern walls. The knights faltered, but Kalen did not. "Release the princess." Kalen's voice rang against the roar of fire, or face the justice of Eldoria. The dragon's laughter shook the cavern. "Justice? You dare speak of justice when your crown is built on lies." It lowered its head until Kalen could see his own reflection in its molten eyes. "Strike if you must, knight, but know that every blow you land may doom your kingdom." Elara stepped forward, her voice breaking through chaos. "Stop," she cried, placing herself between Kalen and the beast. Her gown shimmered with the dust of the ancient chamber, and in the firelight, she seemed almost otherworldly. Kalen froze, his sword trembling in his grip. Elara? His relief was clear, but so was his confusion. "Step away. You don't know what it is capable of." Her gaze locked on his, fierce and unyielding. "You don't understand, Kalen. The dragon is not our enemy. The truth is far older and far darker. If you kill it, you may kill what little hope we have left." The knights shifted uneasily, torn between their commander's orders and their princess's plea. The air trembled with the weight of choice, steel against prophecy, courage against fate. And in that fragile silence, the mountain growled, as though waiting for the first spark to ignite a firestorm. The cavern hung in silence. Kalen's sword gleamed in the firelight, poised to strike, while Elara stood between him and the dragon, her eyes fierce with conviction. Behind them, the knights shifted uneasily, caught between loyalty to their commander and the undeniable authority of their princess. The dragon's wings spread wide, casting shadows that swallowed the chamber whole. "This choice is no longer yours alone," it thundered, its voice echoing like an ancient hymn. "The pact demands witnesses. If you would understand, then see with your own eyes what was hidden from you." Kalen's jaw tightened. He wanted to drag Elara from the lair, away from fire and deception, yet the unwavering determination in her gaze held him still. Against his instincts, he lowered his sword a fraction. The dragon's eyes flared with molten light, and suddenly the cavern dissolved into shadow. Elara gasped as the floor beneath her turned to mist, and Kalen staggered, his knights clinging to one another as vision swallowed them whole. They stood not in the present, but in the past. Upon a battlefield long forgotten, men and dragons fought side by side. The murals Elara had seen in the hidden chamber came alive before them. Kings swearing oaths, dragons bowing their heads, the bond of two races forged in mutual need. But then came the betrayal. A crown gleamed brighter than the sun, forged with the lifeblood of dragons. Men, greedy for power, turned their blades upon their allies. Fire consumed the skies, not from enemies, but from former friends. The pact shattered. Dragons fell. Men rose. And in the end, only silence remained. The vision faded, and the cavern returned. Kaelin's sword now fell heavy in his hand, as if it carried the weight of those ancient sins. Elara's breath trembled as she spoke. All this time, our kingdom was built on stolen fire. She turned to Kaelin, her voice sharp with both sorrow and anger. How many lives were lost? And for what? So our ancestors could wear crowns forged of betrayal. Kaelin said nothing at first, his knuckles white around his blade. At last he answered, voice low, "If this is true, then we have inherited not only a kingdom, but its sins." His eyes lifted to dragon. But why take Elara? Why now? The dragon's reply rumbled like thunder in their bones. Because she carries what no king has borne for centuries, the last spark of the pact. In her blood lies a choice, to restore balance or to repeat the ruin of old. Before Elara could respond, the mountain groaned. The ground split, sending fissures across the cavern floor. Night stumbled, torches falling into rivers of molten rock. From below came a sound unlike the dragon's roar, deeper, older, as if the mountain itself had a voice. The dragon's eyes narrowed, its wings folding in wariness. It stirs, it whispered more to itself into them. Something long sealed by the pact awakens. If it rises unchecked, neither dragon nor man will survive. Elara clutched Kaelin's arm. Her fear mirrored in his eyes. Whatever force slumbered beneath the mountain was older and more terrible than anything they had seen. The dragon turned to them both, its gaze searing. Decide quickly, heirs of men. Will you bind yourselves to the old vow, or will you watch this world burn anew? The choice now stood before them, unity, defiance, or ruin. The cavern shook violently, stones raining from above as molten rivers surged with newfound fury. The knights scrambled for footing, their torches extinguished in the choking ash. Kaelin pulled Elara close, shielding her as the ground split open, revealing a chasm that pulsed with sickly light. From the depths came a sound older than words, a groan that seemed to claw at their very souls. The dragon stepped back, its massive wings half folded in unease. It awakens, it growled, the one bound when men broke their vow. The keeper of balance turned to wrath. If it rises unchecked, all will fall. Kaelin gritted his teeth, his sword drawn though it felt like a child's toy before such power. Then tell us what must be done, he demanded. Tell us how to stop it. The dragon's fiery gaze turned toward Elara. Only she can. Her blood bears the final spark of the pact. But choice is hers alone. Restore the vow or let it die. Elara's chest heaved with each breath. Her kingdom had lied. Her ancestors had betrayed. And now the fate of all rested in her hands. She turned to Kaelin, her voice breaking. If I swear to this pact, I bind myself and all of Eldoria to the dragons again. What if it destroys us? Kaelin's hand rested lightly on her arm. His face was pale, but his eyes were steady. And if you refuse, we lose everything. Sometimes the bravest choice is the one that terrifies us most. The knights looked on, torn between faith in their commander and the fear of their princess, siding with the very beast they had sworn to slay. Some muttered prayers. Others tightened their grips on trembling blades. Elara closed her eyes. In her heart, she remembered the vision, the betrayal, the flames, the silence that followed. She would not let history repeat. The chasm roared, and from its depths, a monstrous form began to rise. It was no dragon, no man, but a creature forged of stone and fire, its body shaped by rage and time. Chains of molten metal clung to its limbs, breaking one by one with each thunderous movement. The dragon bared its fangs, its voice grim, the guardian. Once, it kept the balance between us, but betrayed, it became wrath itself. If it walks free, this world will drown in fire and ash. The knights stumbled back in terror, their courage wavering. Kaelin stood his ground, though his hand shook upon his sword hilt. Elara, he said urgently, whatever you decide, decide now. That thing won't wait. Elara stepped forward, her fear melting into resolve. Her voice rang through the cavern, trembling yet strong. "Then hear me. I will not let this world burn for the sins of the past. If my blood is the key, let it bind anew, not for kings, not for crowns, but for all who live beneath the sky." At her words, the dragon bowed its massive head, wings folding as flames coiled around it like a crown of fire. The air shimmered, and the broken altar in the hidden chamber far below glowed once more, answering her vow. The guardian shrieked, its chains shattering, but the fire surrounding Elara surged brighter, pushing against the rising darkness. Kaelin moved to her side, sword raised, not as her rescuer, but as her shield, ready to face whatever came. The cavern became a battlefield of fate, where vows, fire, and steel collided. The cavern exploded with fury as the guardian tore free of its chains. Its body was a towering mass of stone and molten flame, its eyes glowing with eternal rage. Each step cracked the earth, sending waves of molten fire surging toward the walls. The knights faltered, some dropping their blades in despair. But Kaelin stood firm beside Elara, his voice cutting through the chaos. "Hold your ground. Stand with your princess." His words steadied the men, their fear tempered by duty. The dragon launched into the air, wings thundering, releasing a torrent of fire at the guardian. Yet the creature only roared, swatting flames aside as if there were sparks in the wind. This was no battle of strength alone. It was a test of the vow itself. Elara felt fire racing in her veins, not burning, but alive, an echo of the bond she had just sworn. She raised her hands, and light spilled forth, weaving into the dragon's flames, strengthening them, shaping them into something more than raw fury. The guardian staggered as the fire struck, not with destruction, but with balance. For the first time, its roar faltered. Elara's voice rang out, clear and unshaken. "By the vow of old, I call you not as enemy, but as keeper once more. Your wrath is ended, your balance restored." The cavern itself seemed to listen, the molten rivers slowing, the trembling easing. The guardian's form wavered, cracks appearing across its body, as if the fury that fueled it was crumbling away. But the beast, though weakened, struck out with one final blow. Its molten fist descended toward Elara, intent on crushing the spark of the vow forever. Kaelin leapt before her, shield raised, bracing against a force no man could withstand. The impact threw him to the ground, his shield shattered, his armor scorched. Yet he rose again, sword in hand, eyes blazing with defiance. "If you would take her," he snarled through bloodied lips, "you must go through me." The guardian froze, not at his words, but at the fire that leapt from his blade, born not of magic, but of loyalty. The vow did not bind Elara alone. Through her, it touched all who swore to stand beside her. Kaelin's courage became fire, his oath became strength. With a final cry, Elara and Kaelin struck as one, her light binding the guardian, his blade piercing its molten heart. The cavern blazed with brilliance, then fell into silence. When the smoke cleared, the guardian was gone, its fury dissolved into mountain's heart. The dragon landed heavily, folding its wings, its eyes no longer filled with wrath, but with solemn respect. "The pact lives again," it rumbled. "Through fire, shadow, and sacrifice, balance is restored." The knights, though weary and shaken, dropped to their knees before their princess. Kaelin knelt too, though his gaze lingered on Elara not with duty, but with something deeper, an unspoken bond forged in fire. Elara raised her chin, her voice steady. "We return not as conquerors, but as keepers of truth. Eldoria will no longer hide its sins. We will walk forward in unity, man and dragon bound once more." Outside, dawn broke over the mountain, the first light of a new age. The kingdom would change, forever marked by the vow its princess had renewed. And so the tale of the kidnapped princess became not one of rescue, but rebirth, a story of fire, shadow, and a future forged from both. Years passed, and the tale of Princess Elara and Sir Kaelin became more than history. It became legend. Bards sang of the night the mountain shook and fire met shadow, when a princess bound herself to a vow long broken, and a knight's loyalty shone brighter than any blade. Under Elara's reign, Eldoria flourished. The truth of the old betrayal was no longer buried in dusty archives, but taught openly. so no crown would again be forged from lies. Dragons, once feared as monsters, flew once more across the skies, not as enemies, but as allies, their fire a shield instead of a scourge. Kaelin never sought glory, though his name became as cherished as hers. By her side he stood, not as a rescuer of a helpless princess, but as the unwavering protector of a queen who had chosen courage over fear. And so it was said that in the heart of the mountain, where rivers of fire still ran, the guardian slept once more, no longer in chains of wrath, but in peace, watching over a bond renewed. The people of Eldoria would often look to the dawn, where light broke across the peaks, and remember the vow reborn, that men and dragons, fire and flesh, shadow and steel, when bound by trust, could hold the world in balance once again. How was my story today? Is your body feeling warm now? If you're interested in hearing more of my stories, come back to this spot while you rest after your long journey.